Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to today's Scrum Pulse webinar focused on Scrum and HR with PST Martijn Magermans and Astrid Karsten from ProAwareness. I'm Lindsay Velasina from Scrum.org and I'll be your moderator today. Martin, can you share the slides?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Lindsay.
Perfect. Next slide. Okay, so just some quick guidelines here before we get started. So your microphones will be muted throughout. We will be taking questions, however, so please enter those in the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom platform. And the recording for this will be available within 24 hours along with the slides. So keep an eye out for that in your inbox. That'll be sent to you within 24 hours of the webinar. Next slide. Just a little bit about Scrum.org. Scrum.org is the home of Scrum. We were founded by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum, in 2009. Our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems by improving how they work with higher levels of professionalism. We are focused on helping people learn through free online resources and also our activity-based live training led by more than 340 professional Scrum trainers around the world. We support people wherever they are in their learning journey, helping them to grow. And I hope that today's session plays a part in that. And with that, I will hand it over to Astrid and Martijn.
Thank you, Lindsay. Astrid, would you like to start?
Yes, definitely. My name is Astrid Karsten. I'm very honored that I've been asked to tell something about Scrum and HR. I'm author of two books, actually. One's called Agile Transformation and one is called Toolkit for Agile Talent Development. And I'm a senior consultant in the field of Agile and HR.
Thank you, Astrid. I'm Martijn Magermans. I'm a professional Scrum trainer for Scrum.org and a colleague of Astrid at ProAwareness. I've been working as an Agile coach and consultant for a little over 10 years now. Also having been a product owner for many years, developing innovative services, among one of them being a platform for tracking and tracing surgical instruments in hospitals. And I'm here today to talk to you about Scrum and HR, one of the topics of one of the books Astrid has written.
Okay, yeah, I will give you an introduction of the HR framework, which we will talk about today. But first, one safety measurement, I would say. We are here in one room, but we are tested, we are vaccinated. So everything is safe and we try to keep the distance as far as much as possible. But just so you know that we took all safety measures regarding COVID. So what we were talking about today is actually Scrum and HR, are they friends or maybe enemies? I think I know the answer. I would suggest they are BFFs, actually, best friends forever, or if they are not yet, they should definitely be. And we're going to explain it by the Agile HR framework, which is one of the models I described in my book. And it has 6 aspects that we want to talk about today. You see them here on the screen. I think it's very good if we talk about Agile HR to mention 2 things. We will talk about agility within HR, but also about agility through HR. I think that's a very distinct difference to make. So there are 6 aspects. The 3 that count for agility within HR are the agile way of working, an employee-centric approach, and how you actually do your organizational setup within HR. And through HR, we talk about the increase of individual agility, how you set up the organization to become more agile in like the whole breedte, the whole wide. And also how you can facilitate an agile culture through HR. So that are the 6 topics we are going to cover in the next 40 minutes. Please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat or in the Q&A. We will answer them at the end because well, it's quite a short time, so please put them in the chat. We won't answer them directly, but we will try to come back to them at the end of the presentation. Martijn.
Okay, thank you. Well, starting with the first topic of the Agile HR framework, it's the Agile way of working. And for that, we go back to some things that may be familiar to some of you. Namely, if we look at the Stacy chart, we have different contexts of work and different levels of complexity. And basically what we're saying is that if you are practicing HR in an Agile organization and you want to have an Agile HR organization, is that you're moving into the domain of the complex environment. Because in the old paradigm, the industrial paradigm, we argue that HR was a way of managing resources. If you do that, then you can well be in the complicated domain where it's easy to plan and carry out things in a project program manner. However, moving into the 21st century, moving into the world which is becoming ever more complex, and changing the paradigm from the industrial paradigm to the Agile paradigm, where people are individuals, humans, and highly skilled professionals that you want to support in order for them to be effective and to flourish, then HR becomes a complex domain. And you want to organize your HR capability in your organization accordingly. And basically what it comes down to is that these questions that you see on the screen here are becoming ever more important. I mean, if we want our organization to be successful, if we want our people to flourish and to be most effective in creating value and making our organization successful, are we then as HR pursuing the right goals? Have we set the optimal intermediate goals? And how are we going to learn in order to know what is important and what works and what doesn't? And that means that from the old paradigm, the old world, we're moving into a new world where we want to experiment and practice empiricism as HR in order to constantly adapt to the needs of the people in our organization, so that the organization can adapt to the changing circumstances in the outside world in which the organization is working. Which means that we practice empiricism, we experiment, we learn, and we adapt accordingly. And that means that we practice HR according to an acronym, the acronym of DREAM, and it's quite apt because it is the Agile HR dream as well. Namely, doable, rhythmic, evaluable, attentively, and manageable. And what do we mean with that? Well, we mean with doable that as in Scrum and Agile, practicing empiricism implies learning by doing. So start doing. As you know from the Scrum.org trainings, we can only experience reality through done increments, through things out there that are actually measurable. So we have to start doing things in order to learn. We want to be rhythmic. We want to have a cadence to practice inspection and adaptation. So we apply a cadence, a sprint cadence. We want to create, obviously, transparency and apply evidence-based practice in order to be able to do that learning and to be adaptable. And in order to be effective in value creation and to create quality to deliver value, we have to apply focus in order to be effective. And last but not least, we want to keep a sustainable pace doing all this. Thinking back of the other slide I just showed, on our way to reaching our goals, on our way to reaching our intermediate goals, we want to plan, do, check, act. We want to create things in order to be able to inspect and adapt, but we want to do that in a durable manner and a durable pace, sustainable pace. Once we do that, we can look at what that means for employees. So on to the next topic, employee-centric.
Yeah, and I want to add one a letter actually to the acronym of a DREAM. I think when you put that all together, you will get a dreamy experience for your employees, a yes factor for your employees, but also for your organization. And if we look to HR with the view of having actual clients being your employees, but also your organization, we talk about employee journeys or customer journeys. And that's what this topic is about. So an employee-centric approach means that you, as an HR department, really put your customer at center. Your biggest customer for HR is the employee. However, you also have other customers because you also need to think about strategic workforce planning, for example, the growth of your organization, the things that the organization thinks are very important. So who are HR stakeholders? Sorry. That is at basic is it employees, but we also learned at COVID times that you also have other stakeholders, the organization, but maybe also society. When we were forced to work at home, it was also because we wanted to protect society, for example. So, and if you look to HR from a customer perspective, what are the products or services HR is delivering? And I think there the employee experience and the employee journey kicks in very, very hard, because it's all about experience. What does your organization and what is your employees experiencing within your organization? An employee-centric approach means that you connect organization and individuals through a shared mission, values, and a jointly created experience from an HR perspective. So that sounds really nice, I think, but I want to take you through how do I make such a great killer employee journey or a killer employee experience. And I want to do that actually also with a very valid or very case that's very urgent at the moment. At least here in the Netherlands, we are talking about, should we go back to normal? Should we stay remote work? Should we go for a hybrid way of working? And that is an experience that it's really important to create right and really make it awesome for both employees, but also for organizations. So the first step in making a killer employee experience is define the core mission and values of your organization. For example, here at ProAwareness, it's our mission to increase the happiness of people and organizations, the happiness and success of people and organizations. That may sound a bit vague or grotesque or whatever, but it really guides us through every step, and also through the steps that we define for our employees. Our values are also very visible here. I think one of them is transparency, not surprisingly, I guess, but also one is entrepreneurship, for example, which is also really at the core of our employee journeys. But I will tell a bit more later on. The second step in making a killer employee experience is defining the key touch points for your organizations. For us, it used to be very important, for example, that when we want to hire new employees, that our first touch point was actually physical during an event or during a training or whatsoever. That totally changed now because of COVID, of course. But just to emphasize the difference between organizations, I also know organizations that do really well on online first appointments. We even got a big web store here in the Netherlands that goes as far that they say everybody is a customer of our shop. So when we recruit people, we don't want to give them a bad experience. So we need to make sure that only the right people apply for our functions. They go so far that based on your browser surfgedrag?
Surfing?
Yeah, your browser surfing, so which browser you're using when you enter the website for their vacancies, that they decide whether or not to show you, for example, IT vacancies. I think that goes quite far, but it's just to show you how important it is that these key points, the employee journey for HR is quite the same. It's inflow, through flow, and outflow, but the touch points really define your organization. So one of these touch points at the moment that we need to redefine is actually hybrid way of working. How do we go back to the office, or aren't we going back to the office, or what are we going to do with that? And the next big, very important thing for making a killer employee experience is enriched with meaningful data. And what I really want to say here is measure what is meaningful. And I want to show you that on the example that if you make a new hybrid way of working experience and you're starting to measure, for example, the grade of how many people are in the office, or how many days people are still working at home, that is useful information, but does it measure what you should measure? For example, if you want to have people back in the office because you want to have more moments of creativity and interaction, then you should measure maybe how many ideas do flourish again, how many ideas mature to valuable products for the organization. It doesn't, if people are on the office or not, or if you have an empty office on Wednesdays, it doesn't say anything about the value it gives for your business. So really try to measure what matters if you make such an experience. And I think that's also a very important point of Scrum and Scrum way of working. Really measure what matters. So the fourth thing is there are always like a ton of things going on within HR. Maybe making a new HR experience, make it a new experience for hybrid way of working, do something about verzuim, absence, being it just a normal support task that's going around. There's always a lot going on. But if you really want to make valuable experience, then you need to prioritize and focus. And that also goes with the last thing. You cannot make a killer employee experience if you not evaluate again and again and again. So these are the 5 steps of a killer employee experience. Start with the mission and the values of your organization. Make them part of your experience. For example, I mentioned making people happier, but also entrepreneurship for our situation. If we want to make the new hybrid experience, we need to take that into account. What do we put on people's own responsibility? For example, define the key points that are very valuable for your organization, enrich with meaningful data, start prioritizing and evaluate.
And having said that, you have a purpose with your HR organization, and that leads us to the next step, and that is the organizational setup. And basically what Astrid has been telling, it has everything to do with what mindset you look at what you're doing as an HR organization. Basically it means, and again, you will recognize this slide from other Scrum.org training material, because it really connects, because Agile HR requires a product mindset, in case of HR, a service mindset. In the industrial paradigm, the old world that I described a little earlier, organizations and staff departments, among which is used to be HR, work according to programs and projects. We have a policy that needs to be implemented in order to create a way of managing our resources. Now we're moving away from that. We're moving to a product mindset where we want to know how we can support the people in our organization to be successful and to help our organization to be successful. That requires a product mindset where we work from outside in, continuously with a business view on things. And what does that mean in the context of Agile HR? Well, that means that we are looking at things like user adoption of HR services. We are looking at employee happiness, of course, because that's what we're doing it for. And all that should contribute our HR services, our HR policy should contribute to business outcomes. So it should have a positive impact on business performance. And if you put these two mindsets opposite, like in this picture, what you get is, like I said, a program approach where we think of a policy which has to be implemented, which leads to less involvement by the people in the organization. It's a task-oriented, output-oriented approach, which is not guaranteed to have a good fit to the needs of the people in the organization or the reality of the organization, the position the organization is in. So that's waste, and thereby also less beneficial business outcomes. And like I explained, the product mindset, where we see that we are providing a service in order for people to be successful and to flourish, our employees become our users and customers. And that leads to happier employees who can work with more creativity, more effectiveness, and that results in better business outcomes. So it's also a very strong business case to practice HR from the Agile paradigm. And if you look at that, then you can also translate that, of course, to what does that mean for the roles in an organization? Well, we all know what a Scrum team is like, I assume. And the question would be, if we want to translate Agile HR to the Scrum framework, what does that mean for roles and responsibilities? Because the end result is still creating value by self-managing and cross-functional teams. However, the question is, how do we translate these roles in our situation, our organization, our Agile HR department to HR teams? And well, you have, of course, different roles, but the question is, who is responsible in the case of our Agile HR organization for maximizing value, or better said, who is the product owner? The Agile HR specialists are developers. How do we create a skill set and create teams of developers where we have cross-functionality, where we cover our responsibilities 360? And who is responsible for helping our people to grow in self-managing capability, in skill set, in maturity? Who can help us to remove impediments? Who can fill in the servant leadership role? Or better said, who will be a Scrum Master in our organization? These are important questions that we need to answer when we translate the Agile HR way of working and Agile HR view to our HR department that we are transforming. For instance, a product owner would be a Agile business partner, if that is a term familiar to you. Developers, again, HR specialists, and what does that mean for their skill set? And who is the servant leader, the Scrum Master in our organization? Important questions when we turn this view into reality in our own organizations.
One step.
Yeah.
Go one step back, because I think it's very important here that the cross-functionality within HR. I see a lot of HR departments that say, yeah, but we already transformed and we do an Agile approach. We have our dailies, we have our reviews, and we plan according to a sprint, etc., etc. But I think in 90% of the cases, HR is deeply siloed. I'm not sure if that's the correct word, but we are very used to the idea that recruitment is for recruiters, that learning and development is for learning and development, that the HR business partners are the only ones to talk to the business actually, and that strategic workforce planning is only for strategic HR professionals. And I strongly believe, and I think that is also backed up by Scrum, by the Scrum framework, I strongly believe that we will have more inclusion, better creative solutions for all these kinds of problems when we really get the views of everybody from HR also within the teams. But it's really a big difference, and it's also maybe a bit scary. So if you are about to guide an HR department towards Scrum and using the Scrum framework, really focus, of course, on the events, but also on how you organize this. So the cross functionality is very, very important, I think, here. And then I'll also ask something on an individual level. And we cross now the line from within HR to through HR, but it also goes for the individuals within HR. We know that it becomes more and more important to be more fluid within your roles. And we also know that if we want to stay relevant for tomorrow's work demand, that it asks something from us different than it used to ask from us 10 years ago. For example, we already know at the moment that if you start an education to surgeon, it will take you 10 years, for example, but you probably will never take up a scalpel anyway, because the operation will be performed by robots in 10 years. So we need to find a way to make sure that you can stay relevant, also by changing, constantly changing other demands that are asked from you and from your position and from your role. And Scrum maybe not directly ties to that, although we can spend a lot of time talking about T-shaping, etc. But I think Scrum, in essence, is a good way to learn. So set your goal, what is your direction, what is it really that you're striving for, and then approach your learning as if it's a Scrum pattern, I would say. I've made this slide only one. I made it very small because I think it's a very wide and very broad topic. But I do want to state that I think it's very important for HR departments that if they want to really increase agility within the whole organizations, that they also should think about individual agility in terms of how do I learn, actually help employees keeping relevant, rather than making extensive programs and learning programs. Also, for example, in IT, we can focus on training developers, learn them Java or C# or whatever, I don't know. But also, we also know from programming that it won't be done by humans very shortly after this meeting, probably. In a few years, that all will be automated and computers can program way much more better than humans can. So we need to find out what it is that makes us unique as an employee. And I think HR should facilitate employees in staying relevant. That having said, we are going to what I think is a very important topic to cover right now, and that's the unlimited organization. Martijn already told a bit about, okay, most of the organizations are established within the Industrial Revolution, and we approached our organizations basically like a machine, and HR contributed to that, and it did well. It was necessary at that point in time, but they created all kinds of structures that to define that machine, actually. What we currently see, especially when we want to work with Scrum, is that we need living organisms as an organization. So probably the HR organism, which is adaptable, flexible, and facilitating organizational-wide agility. Well, a machine is defined by its structures, and we have three kinds of structures. We have the control systems, for example, the more traditional performance management, rewarding systems. We have power structures, for example, how is the budget mandate arranged within your organization? The decision-making, is that centralized or more decentralized? And organizational structures like the organizational charts that we all know, probably the hierarchical layers that we have within an organization. While an organism isn't defined by structures at all. it's defined by the stories they tell, the symbols they have, the routines and the rituals you make within your organization. And that's quite a gap, to be honest. Actually, at the moment, an organism is currently undermined by the machine HR made. For example, if you look at performance management and Scrum, or Scrum teams, working in a Scrum team, if you really believe that transparency and openness and giving feedback to each other is the important thing to keep your organization growing, then the structure of performance management is actually going against it. I have this example when working at a big telecom provider, where they wanted to facilitate the 360 feedback. So everybody should give feedback to everybody within the team, and also to the product owner and the Scrum Master, which was very, very nice. However, based on that, vinkje beoordeling, based on that, what's beoordeling? Based on that feedback, whether it be very good or not so good or average or extremely good, you would also get more or less salary promotion. And that's very unsafe. That structure makes it very unsafe to work in a Scrum team, actually. Because if you are responsible for somebody else's financials, actually, you cannot be totally open and transparent. The same goes for working with what we call in the Netherlands coast placings, but I'm not sure if that's the international term for it. But if you work for Department A and your skill set is currently more needed in Department B, that's probably not possible because Department A has a different financial stream than Department B. These are all kind of structures and systems that really avoid the organization for developing into an organism that you really would want to have and should have, I think, if you want to have organizational-wide agility. So I made this canvas, and maybe you can think about, okay, what is the organism, what's the story we want to tell with our organization, and what are the current structures and systems, and is there a gap in between? And probably there is. And you need to be very honest towards yourself, and you need to start think very differently and start experimenting to make it, to turn that around. A very inspiring example maybe in that case is one of a big financial. They struggled with the financing of people. So they had financing in departments instead of projects, basically, and they started with smart jobs. So they made actually the funding for projects independent of departments, and everybody could just say, okay, I want to work on this project now for the next 2 or 3 months. Maybe then my skill set is more required in another project, but I can do that because it was funded independently. I think it's very inspiring, but they started with a very small experiment. They only put up one project and see who was responding, and then they scaled that experiment actually. So if you are an HR professional working in HR, you can really facilitate this unlimited organizing of your organization and also facilitate agility by that. And for that, you need to take a look at, okay, what's the organism, would the organism look like, and what are the machine structures that are currently avoiding us to be an organism.
And with that organism also comes a different culture, which is kind of obvious when you look at the comparison of the organism versus the machine. And that leads us to the last topic of the Agile HR framework, namely culture. In this case, it's culture with a question mark, because what is culture? Culture is a very broad term that can mean a lot of things. In the basis, in organizations, it often comes down to the point of the way we do things around here. It's the mindset of the people, mindset, attitude, and behavior. It's often things that people find difficult to describe because it's so deeply ingrained in their behavior and their way of thinking. However, we do have some artifacts to make culture a bit more concrete. And you will probably know quite a few of them already. Namely, we have, for instance, the Agile Manifesto. We have the Scrum values. We have what is called spiral dynamics. It's a model that says something about the way people look at and interpret the world around them and act accordingly. Another way of looking at culture and organizations is the way Frederic Laloux does in his book, Reinventing Organizations. And if you're involved in Agile and HR in your organization, then Agile People Manifesto is also a place to look. If we look at those things and then wonder, okay, what does that mean for Agile HR? Well, starting with the Agile Manifesto, for instance, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Well, I guess that's pretty obvious. That doesn't change much from what was originally meant. Working software over comprehensive documentation is, of course, working HR services that are actually effective and wanted over comprehensive plans and programs and ivory tower documents that are thought out by people without working together with the people that they're doing it for. Which brings you to the next point, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. That would be, how can we work together with the people in our organization that we're doing it for, our users, so to say, over imposing a policy in the organization, which is typically industrial paradigm thinking. And of course, like we said earlier, practice empiricism, try things out, experiment, learn from that and adapt. So responding to change over following policy plans. That's one example of how to translate culture items, culture artifacts to a effective culture in your Agile HR organization. Same goes for the Scrum values: courage, focus, commitment, respect, and openness. Well, these are excellent values to practice as both practice in your Agile HR organization and use as a basis for the policies that you are developing with and for the people in your organization. And in that manner, you can translate artifacts and values that are already out there in the Agile domain to an Agile way of working and use them for inspiration in Agile HR policy. Astrid, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think
culture?
what a very nice example to mention is, for example, the contracts of Tony Chocolonely. They actually made a contract that's in the form of een gouden wikkel.
Chocolate bar wrap.
Yeah, chocolate bar wrap. So the whole contract is on that single chocolate bar wrap. So it's really tiny, it's really concise, and it's really clear. It fits their mission, it fits their values, it fits their brand also, but it also goes for customer collaboration over contract negotiation. I would say, I think that's a very inspiring example regarding culture. But also, I think it's very important to keep in mind that you as an HR department are a facilitator or maybe even the carrier of an Agile culture. Also based on the structures, which we talked about in unlimited organizing, to keep that in mind when you make a structure, when you make an HR process or an HR tool, really think, how would it fit the culture that I want to achieve within my organization? That's what I would add to this sheet. I think we did a very well job. Lindsay asked us to do this in 40 minutes, and I have 1 minute left for the wrap up. We talked about the Agile HR framework, which consists of 2 layers, agility within HR and agility through HR. We discussed 6 aspects. We had talked about the Agile way of working, how you can really put the customer central, what it means for your organizational setup, both in HR, but also within the whole organization. We talked about the concept of individual agility, and we spoke about Agile culture. And to emphasize once again the statement that I did at the beginning of this webinar, I really think Scrum and HR are best friends forever. That would be it, Lindsay.
Great time management. Okay, so we have quite a few questions coming in, and please keep them coming. If we don't have time for any of these questions, for all of these questions, I will share these with Astrid and Martijn afterward, and they can address them offline. So this first question comes from Carlos. Using Scrum and OKRs or EBM, can you share some hints to balance collective and individual performance evaluation? Try to set individual and collective OKRs would be a good approach.
I would love that. If I translate it to my personal situation, I'm not totally sure if I understood 100%, but let's verify later. The mission of ProAwareness is to increase the happiness and success of people and organizations. My personal mission is to tell stories to inspire people. In the end, I wrote 2 books, which was very important for me. Probably that's maybe not an OKR, but you could somehow translate it. My personal OKR of writing a book actually really also contributes to the OKRs and success of ProAwareness in this case, because we will our way is to share the knowledge we have about agile topics. And having an employee that has actually 2 books on his or her name contributes to showing the world that we have the knowledge within our organizations. So yeah, I think, Carlos, it's very good to actually connect individual OKRs, probably wouldn't mention them OKRs, but connect your personal goals and cascade them to your team goals and even organizational goals, yes. More in the HR field, I would say, I think it's very important, as I mentioned, for the hybrid way of working example, to really tie the HR goals that you want to achieve with your HR experiences towards business goals. It's great to have a great hybrid way of working experience, but if it not contributes to the business goals, that would also go wrong, I would say. So working with OKRs and EBM is very good for HR. I hope this was enough for you, Carlos.
Great. Carlos, if you need more clarification, please enter that into the Q&A. So this question comes from Leonardo. What metrics for employee engagement do you think will be relevant in the new normal? So I'm guessing by new normal, you mean post-COVID.
Yeah, you want to answer or you want me to answer?
Well, I can say something about that, and then maybe you can add if I left anything out. What is going to be important in the new normal after the COVID situation is that, I guess, is a little beside the topic of Agile HR per se, because it's more about how can we effectively collaborate as individuals on and offline more so than we did before. And it does connect to the Agile way of working in the sense that we used to be very much attached to being at the same location. So physical presence used to be very important for teams to be effective. And it still is, but we have learned that much more is possible that we thought was possible working online. I mean, how can we effectively coach and have teams, distributed teams, grow effectively? That is one of the challenges that we face in modern day organizing. But now, during COVID, everyone was offshore basically. And at least in my experience, we were still able to perform much better than expected at first. So human flexibility is much greater than expected. What values are important to appraise employee performance in an agile context and post-COVID? I think it has more to do with an effective combination of Agile values. So the values that you saw on the culture slide on the one hand, and the purpose and mission of the organization on the other hand. And another thing that maybe is not entirely connected to this question, but to the question asked before, apart from the OKRs and EBM, what you also see in organizations that are experimenting with Agile HR is that they put the appraisal function that used to be a very strict management and HR function much more into the teams. So basically, again, the Agile point of take it to the team. What values do we hold important? How do we contribute to the success of the organization? How do we create value? And how are we effective as a team and as individuals in the team? And let the team give feedback to people on how they are performing. And find a way to incorporate that in your appraisal scheme. So that's maybe also a hint and something to add to the question before this one. I hope this helps, Leonard and Carlos.
Yeah, and I think what's also a nice addition to make is Google actually did a lot on people analytics. Maybe you heard of the project Aristotle. Sorry for my English. And they found out actually that increasing the ENPS, which I heard mentioning you, Lindsay, raising with, if they put $1 effort in it, it would gain them $2.50 business value. They found really nice ways to attach those numbers to each other. And I think in the new normal, we need to redefine if that's still the case. Should we measure ENPS? Should we measure something else? I think there's a lack of sense of belonging at the moment at employees, but can we connect that? If we increase the sense of belonging, will that also give us business value? Very nice literature in that on that topic is maybe excellence in people analytics. I will put the book, the reference in the slides. I think next question, Lindsay.
Okay, yeah. So this question I was actually wondering about myself. So this comes from Candace. Where do benefits such as healthcare, retirement funding, time off fall into this mindset? A product or service or both?
For me, these are all part of the experience with the flow. I would say you have inflow, through flow and outflow. And we like to talk, when we have about flow, we talk about growth mainly. How are people growing within an organization? But the experiences of making sure that people are healthy, that they feel good, that they like being at you as an employer is also part of experience. Yeah, it's a bit short answer maybe, but I definitely don't think they should fall out.
Yeah. Okay, this next question here comes from Amy. Can you say a little bit more about idea generation in relation to HR and Agile?
Sorry.
Versus Scrum as a way of getting things done?
I didn't hear the first.
ID generation.
ID generation?
In the context of Agile.
Sorry, identity generation. Like.
Yes, idea generation.
I probably don't understand the question totally.
Lindsay, could you rephrase that? Is it ideas or identity? ID.
Ideas.
Yeah, ideas.
Ideas.
Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Okay.
Well, I think that ties into the point where I mentioned the question: who is responsible for maximizing value in our Agile HR organization? So who has the product owner role? That is one way to look at it, bringing the outside inside. How are we going to create value for the people that we're doing it for, our users, our customers, so to say? the ideas, I think, come from the interaction of the Agile HR organization with the surrounding organization, the people that we're doing it for, and also from learning from experiments. So I think as an Agile HR organization, you should think about how can we get an ideal experience if we let the people that we're doing it for say what that would be like. And in an example, for instance, we teach product owners to practice story mapping with stakeholders as a very concrete example. And there too, we say to the stakeholders, if you could think of anything you would like, what would this look like? How would you want it? And then we converge from there back to, okay, so then what's first and what's most important? Well, techniques like that can also be used in the organization for HR policy. So, dear colleagues, what would make a great employee experience for you? What would you want? And then, given that, and given the fact that we have to make choices, I mean, we don't have endless resources. What is most important? What do we do first? And then we know with what we can experiment. Does this help? Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. I think that was a good answer. If you need clarification, please type that into the chat then. So this question comes from Jerry. It's kind of a big question. So can you share the biggest challenge you faced when implementing Scrum in HR?
Well, maybe it's a big question, but I think the answer is quite short, at least to me. It's what we see in every transformation, everywhere where we start implementing Scrum. It's basically fear. We cannot see what's beyond this gap. It's so different from traditional HR that a lot of HR professionals and also HR directors and managers that really understand the need for doing it differently, putting the employee central. They all know that's a good step to make, but it's somehow a step in towards nowhere, or they cannot see it. I think the gap is actually very small, and I think it's a way of doing it, stepping through the door. But I think that's the biggest challenge. They cannot see what's beyond.
And that basically comes down to the natural resistance to change that is natural to all humans.
That makes sense. Okay, this next question is about talent acquisition. So how can we initiate Scrum for talent acquisition? And they have a note here. It also works with multiple departments to onboard a candidate.
Yeah, it has several components, I would say. I mentioned already in the beginning or during the presentation that we see recruitment really as the sole responsibility of recruiters or talent acquisition. However, I really think you could achieve more if you involve more ideas and more views on the topic. Also, I think talent acquisition most of the time is like they're more reactive than really choosing what is important right now. I'm coaching an organization at the moment that has about 200 vacancies that should be filled in. And I challenge them actually to say, okay, but which vacancies are you really going to focus on in your next sprint? Like, will it be the 10 from, I don't know, food and beverage, or will it be the 10 from leadership? I don't know. And they said, but we have to do them all. And I said, I know you have to do them all, but you definitely will be faster if you focus and say, okay, this is what we're going to do right now. And it also ties in a bit the question, is Scrum always the best approach? Or, and I hope you can fill in some more about that. Or what can we learn from Kanban, for example, or Scrum with Kanban? Because I think Kanban also, when you talk about WIP limits, for example, really forces you to focus on filling in manageable portions of work instead of putting in all those talent requests, all these acquisition requests, and try to solve them all. What I also think is very good in this topic is that talent acquisition is not only recruitment, it also goes about learning and development. Do you do campus recruitment? Are there other ways to think about where to reach or get in contact with talent, but also with the way we look at talent? I think there's a very inspiring podcast on Spotify. It's called, I think, Squiggly Careers. And it's questioning how we are thinking currently about filling in positions. Do we always want a bachelor degree or master degree or whatever? Or are there other ways to show that you have talent? If you read all the books about HR, for example, or listened to all the podcasts and watched a tremendous amount of videos, is that maybe not even better at this point in time than having a bachelor degree in human resources? So to wrap up your question, talent acquisition and Scrum, I think the multidisciplinary approach is very important for talent acquisition and having delivering the best experience for both the organization as the newly hires or the people that you want to hire. But you can also use, I think, very important things from Scrum with Kanban.
Yeah, sure. And if I may add one more thing to wrap up this question, I think talent acquisition and Agile, I'll use the broader term Agile here, inherently go together. Because if you look at the story we just told you, what it basically comes down to is that what you are telling your employees is, in order for you to be successful in our organization, what you have to do is be the best version of yourself. And we're going to help you to be the best version of yourself and to flourish with your unique talents. And that is very appealing to new generations. It's very appealing to talented people because that's what they want. They want to self-realize. They want to become the best version of themselves. And that is what makes Agile and Scrum very effective in talent acquisition, because you allow people to be the best version of themselves in your organization.
Yeah, good addition.
That's great advice. Okay, so we are coming up on our time here, so I think it's about time that we close up. Thank you everyone for all of your questions. I'm going to share the questions with Astrid and Martijn so that they can address them later. So with that, Martijn, can you please share the screen again?
Yes, I can. For the closing remarks. Here you go.
Great. Can you hit the next slide?
Yeah. Oh.
There we go. So just to close us up here, we always encourage you to continue your learning. So feel free to check out the free digital learning paths on the Scrum.org website. There's some good materials there to get you started with Scrum, or if you are practicing Scrum regularly, there are a lot of things to help you along your journey. So please feel free to check those out. Next slide. And please stay connected with us through our forums, social media channels, and webinars like this one. We do approximately 2 to 3 webinars a month. So please check out the calendar on our website for future content. And that is it from the Scrum.org side. Do you guys have anything else that you would like to share?
I will at least stop sharing these slides. I want to thank you for your interest in this webinar. If you want to know more, well, Lindsay will send the questions that are still open to us, and we will try to answer them. And I think we'll put them on a sheet, or maybe we will find a time to record another video. If you want to connect with us, that's also fine, of course. We're always looking forward to help you out with your Scrum questions, and especially if they are in HR, please contact me. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thanks very much for watching, and good luck with Agile HR, everyone.
Thank you, Astrid and Martijn, and thank you everyone for joining. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.